you talk about the stadium when you guys were there when the Bills played on Thanksgiving, the Saints, and Dan had like a moldy sandwich that they gave everyone.
It wasn't moldy. It was the saddest box lunch you've ever seen. That's a big part of the ranking.
Yes,
it's a big part of the ranking.
Lunch.
When you talk about worst franchises, what are they feeding the media?
All right, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus channel presented by Connors and Ferris, Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I am Jenna Cottrell. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And welcome to the latest episode of The League presented by Stellar Roofing, Windows, and Siding. In this episode, we're going to talk the list of 5 best and 5 worst franchises in the NFL. We all have our own answers.
Yeah.
We have chatted very, very briefly, Mike and I, but I'm curious to see what our outlooks will look like and what we put into consideration in terms of making this list.
So I started thinking of this when we talk in our other podcasts about this league, and I would say things like, this is what the dumb teams do, the dumb franchises. It's why they keep doing the same things over and over again without having the success. And then we've also talked about the teams that take advantage of the rules and somehow keep winning and making those draft picks where everybody's like, God, they did it again. How'd the Ravens get another safety? Like those kind of things, right? That work. And then it has to be success, right? It can't just be, well, you're doing all the right things, but it's not working on the field. I put all those things together, even thinking about the franchise itself, like, how's your place to play? Do you have facilities that players want to be at? Do you find ways to get the job done? Is the fan base engaged? Now, those things are less important than the actual winning on the field, but I kind of thought of it big picture, like these guys know what they're doing and it works on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not legacy. It's not necessarily 20 years. It's not just heading into this year. It is kind of the all-encompassing of the current vibe that is going on for the past few years of teams. We want to hear what your thoughts are. Even before we start this podcast and this video, do you think are the best 5? What do you think are the worst 5 run franchises in the NFL? I think that it'll be, if you do that now and you comment in, I think it'd be fun to see what the comments are by the end, because maybe you're going, oh, I didn't think of that team. Like Mike had a couple different ones than I had when we were just kind of running through it. So to see how that goes.
Yeah. All right, let's start. We'll start with the good ones.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to hear, do we want to say our top 5 and then decide the order, or how do we want to do it?
I would say the 5 teams. I'm just going to give you as we go along, and you guys can too, teams you have on your list. And then maybe at the end, at the end of this, we'll say in what order you would put them.
Because I think there's a unanimous 4.
Oh, I don't know about that. Let's wait on that before we say that.
Okay.
So we'll give a few. Like, I'm going to throw one out there that I have in my top 5. This is no particular order. And I have the Baltimore Ravens in there.
I also have them in my top 5.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we started out with the same team. I think the Ravens have won football games, done it in different ways. We talked about the years, but you can go back to the Joe Flacco days.
Joe Flacco.
Which he's still playing in this league, so it's not that far along. Stability, certainly in the front office.
Yep.
Was Ozzie before that. They've done a great job with DaCosta. They've got Harbaugh has been there forever. They have brought in Lamar. Like, have they made mistakes? Yes. They went through a couple of tough years. I didn't love the way they handled Lamar at that time. It was a weird circumstance for the franchise.
Isn't that wild to think about now?
Sort of off brand for what they've been, but they got their act together. And yes, as Bills fans know, they can't get by the Chiefs, just like the Bills can't get by the Chiefs. But I think they've been a heck of a franchise building that thing up in Baltimore through the years after, they lost their team to Indianapolis years ago.
Especially when I look at the Ravens, I do think of an identity and stability that comes with, they're going to play great defense. They're really good at home. Like all of those things.
Especially at night.
Especially at night in the all black uniforms. I think of the coaching is good. I think for whatever reason, Harbaugh gets a pass. I don't think he gets as much grief as he should when you look at the grand scheme of his resume. I don't think that for everybody Bills fan that wants Sean McDermott fired, I always say, look at what Harbaugh has accomplished. And I don't buy that the AFC North is this gauntlet of a division. Yes, they all beat each other up because at times I think they're not that very good at teams to begin with. But this thought of division titles, AFC championship appearances, Super Bowl appearances, I would argue that Harbaugh should be on the hot seat more than he is, but it's just kind of that legacy of it's the Ravens, it's Harbaugh.
I want to ask Jenna this. Harbaugh, just like Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, have Super Bowl championships on their resume. I think that's the difference between them and Sean McDermott. Because Sean doesn't have the Super Bowl championship. When a guy has that, it's a little bit like you're that made man.
Yeah.
Not forever, but they win. You win games, and you've said, well, he's done it before. It's now going back a few years since they've won it all.
You say, and that's it. And I hear that. But I also do think that the it is what every team is chasing every season. And it is that coveted that to have that on your resume is a massive bonus. And you're right. It does make you a bit of a made man. And is there an expiration date on that? Yes. But is there also leniency that comes with, hey, this guy's done it before. He can figure out how to do it again? Absolutely. But I definitely do have the Ravens in my top 5 because of the sustained success that they have had, the stability, like we talked about. I think the fan base plays into it too. The culture, the identity. And I think they have Lamar, they have Derrick Henry. They have some like big name players.
Yep, that helps.
That have draw.
And they, like they just went got Alexander. That is such a Ravens move.
Yes. Yeah.
And
definitely.
It's usually like, and that's why we joked, we thought Von Miller would end up, who knows, he may end up being there. They always do that. They bring in those players. I mean, they brought in Derrick Henry. There were people questioning, is that going to work? And not only did it work, it flourished for the year. And they have Lamar. So they've done a lot of things right. The Bills have the ones gotten by them in these big moments, but they've gotten to the championship game when they didn't play the Bills and they lost to the Chiefs. So we know where the Chiefs are, but I do think they are one of those franchises. I would say I love the stadium. They made some changes the last time we were there. Didn't love it for the media because we loved Baltimore. Kind of made a few mistakes, we thought, but there's a lot of pluses to that
I just
place.
remember it was pouring when I was there.
Crab cakes in football. That's what Maryland does.
Yeah.
It's creative.
Thank you.
Let's put that on a shirt.
Where do we want to say where we have them in our top 5 now?
Ooh,
or do you want to wait?
We can wait. Let's go. Let's see Jenna, who would give us another team you have on your top 5?
I mean, I had the Chiefs. That to me is number 1, just because of the success that they have had. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, the Super Bowl championships. I think the fan base, I think that while they've had to rebuild or retool within the time that Patrick Mahomes has been quarterback, and while I do think that the talent on the field this last couple of seasons hasn't been as dynamic as maybe earlier editions of the team, that they are going to be a tough team. That they're going to show up in the playoffs, and usually, except for in the Super Bowl this last season, they find a way to get it done. So because of that, to me, the resume that they have, it's hard for me not to put them at number 1.
Yeah, they do. I mean, what is it? 5 Super Bowls that they've been in and won 3.
3.
Because they lost to Tampa.
And they lost to
to the Eagles this last time, but then they beat them and they beat the Niners twice.
They are what, if we were to have done this, if we could take a time machine back 10 years ago, they're the Patriots.
Yeah,
I mean that the way that they've
I was like, what?
They've rebuilt. They have a Hall of Fame coach. They have found ways to win. Jenna, I think you say it best. Like when you say they found ways to win, they've done it offensively by scoring a ton of points. They've done it by having the best defense in the league. They've done it by drafting players and utilizing 3rd and 4th round picks pretty well, and finding Chris Jones in the 2nd round. Like they find value. They then become the team that signs the guy that just wants to win a ring. And then all of that aura, it is a phenomenal stadium. It's a great environment. It has almost a college-like feel to it when you go to a game in their tailgating sense. Their fans are good. I won't say they're great because of the rivalry that there is, but there is that mutual respect.
They have great fans.
Yeah, they do. And listen,
do.
They always had an outstanding atmosphere at that stadium.
Yeah.
And they were good before. They had been a good team. I mean, the Bills played them way back in the day when they had Joe Montana. They eventually had, Marcus Allen on that team. And and they played when Dick Vermeil came to coach. They were a playoff team. Like
And he
they've
cried.
had that. Yeah,
Who-
well, he
who
always
cried?
cries.
Dick Vermeil just
I
constantly
thought you
cried.
said
Yeah.
you cried, like talking about Mike. I was like, Michael crying?
No, I wasn't crying.
No,
But
Dick Vermeil is
Okay,
he's still
yes.
crying.
he is.
That's fair.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's Dick Vermeil. But they have always been good. But Jenna and I were at when they finally won the Super Bowl for the second time. I mean, they won it way back in the day at the beginning when they won with Hank Stram as the coach in the beginning of the Super Bowls. And then it was 50.
You remember those days?
Well, hey, look, I was a little child at the time. And then Jenna and I are there in Miami.
That was
when
the
they won
year of 2020.
Right
Yes,
before
right
COVID.
season
before
of 2019.
that they won, and they have been
Yeah.
great. Brett Veach is the guy, as a general manager, has done a wonderful job. I will say, though, the way they're built, they have been able to sustain this success without doing certain things. Like they do not do a great job on the offensive line,
Mhm.
and they've been able to survive that, I think, more than thrive in that way. So I think that's, a little bit against them. But, I mean, they've been in the AFC Championship game, what? Is it how many years in a row that they've been in? And they hosted
makes me
it,
sick to my stomach to think about.
So,
Yeah, it's
yes, they have been
Arrowhead Invitational.
Yeah.
They have been that team and then found their way. 3 titles, Patrick Mahomes.
Also, what's more impressive too is when you think about the run.
7.
Yeah.
Is when
yeah.
Not this past year, the year before, when they went on the road, when nobody thought, hey, this team has just always been home. And they went on the road and won the games they were supposed
They beat the Bills and they beat the Ravens.
Right.
Yeah.
On the road. That was a big milestone to that dynasty talk that they had built. Was like, well, you got to go on the road and do it. And they did it. So
yeah,
there's no question there.
When the circumstances aren't perfect, can you win? And they did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dan, you got another one for the top 5?
Yeah, I think this is very fitting. I think the Bills are one of the best franchises, top 5 franchises in the league. And again, we couldn't have said this 10 years ago. We would have had them in the bottom of the...
Or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 20 years ago.
So it's kind of cool to get to say the team we cover is one of the best. Not only that, it's the way that they're run. It's the way that they've built it. It hasn't been perfect, but developing the players with the coaches, like they've grown together. Like what Sean McDermott was when he came here isn't what he is now. And the legacy that he's built in Buffalo, turning them to where you said like, oh, Orchard Park was always such a tough place to play. It's because teams didn't care. Like they would just lose games because there was just no atmosphere and no intensity. So now the fact of what they have, the home field advantage, the new stadium that these fans deserve, this team deserves, the house that Josh is building, all of those things. I think it's a top 5 franchise. The success they've had, all of those things, I think it's no question.
It was the place where motivation went to die.
That's what it was.
We
Motivation
used
went
to say all the time because they would catch teams coming in going, in Buffalo. They were only worried about how bad's the weather going to be.
Yeah.
Even if they were catching a game in October, and that's how the Bills used to win. They never had a real plan. I mean, you go back to when they had great general managers, when they had Bill Polian and John Butler during that stretch of time, and they won, and they went to the Super Bowls. They did all that. And then they got away from that.
Mm-hmm.
They really did. They tried with Tom Donahoe in the beginning. It just never took. They thought they had one of those guys. And then they were just a meandering franchise for 2 decades. And then when the Pagulas made the right decision with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, and then that group led by Beane went out and said, Josh Allen's the guy, it changed everything for the franchise. But they haven't rested on that. And we know, I'm sure I've already seen in the comments, we haven't won the Super Bowl. They haven't gotten the Super Bowl. Yes, they are very well aware of it, but they have maintained a incredibly high standard, and they just like the Ravens. They can't get by the Chiefs. That has been the thing. The Bengals did it once, but the other teams haven't been able to do it.
I think it's fitting too when you talk about Beane had talks about at the end of this year when he talks about we're going to keep knocking on the door. We're going to keep knocking on the door. Eventually you'll get through, meaning like that Super Bowl appearance and that Super Bowl victory that we all say, I know your fears in the trust tree, but like we all think it's coming. Sam Presti, who is the VP and GM of the Thunder, he had a quote today or whether it was last night, said that shortcuts shorten long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's a really cool saying. and to have the big picture that when the Bills came in and when Sean McDermott and Brandon Bean and they snapped the drought in 2017, and it was like, okay, but then they pulled it back to the studs because they wanted long-term success. They knew that Tyrod wasn't going to be the answer. They knew this offense needed more weapons. They knew they needed to rework defense and draft better and rework the cap to get it back where it was. To me, those are things that well-run franchises do. And the bad ones try and take shortcuts to get that small success. But the teams that I all have in my top 5 are teams that it's not just been a flash in the pan. And I'm not talking about just, it's not as easy to me as when we're looking at the best franchise of like, well, who's won the most Super Bowls or who's made the most Super Bowl appearances? That's part of it over these last, I don't know if we're going 10 years or 8 years, most recently. It's what I think, even moving forward, where I think this franchise is in a good position as one of the best in the league.
Yeah. And your point about the Bills were that franchise that always wanted to try to, bring it in T.O. and trying to trade for Drew Bledsoe and doing those things, as opposed to making a move that you think when the Bills attempted to do that with Von Miller, where you've already got it set up.
Correct.
And now you're bringing in a player. And I think back to talking to Micah Hyde. He hadn't announced his retirement, but he was kind of talking about it. And he was like, I laugh when people poo-poo culture. And they'll be like, everybody talks about culture. Oh, no, culture's very real. And in Buffalo, it was very real. And Hyde was like, yeah, basically, like, there was no culture when we came in here.
Yeah.
Or how about,
they had a lot to do with it.
When he leaves Buffalo and goes to Miami and goes, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
But to the point of Sean, and when they were new, and that was all new, a guy like Poyer and Hyde, they brought in the right kind of guys. They didn't really know it, maybe a little bit with Poyer. Guy like Lorenzo Alexander was here who'd been with Rex, but then he came in with this group, and they started to build that. And the biggest thing I can say is guys really want to be in Orchard Park. Much more than it used to be. They had lousy facilities, which all goes to this too.
Absolutely.
They built the facilities. They built the training area. They did all those things that guys say, I like being with my teammates. I like being here, being in Buffalo. And they tell guys around the league, this is a good place to be, because everybody jokes about the weather. Well, people want to be there because they want to be with the franchise.
There's no palm trees.
Yeah. Yes.
That is true.
There is the difference in the franchises.
It's almost though like eating your vegetables, or like I make you always say, do what you have to do now so you can do what you want to do later. And I think what was essential to this Bills being the team that they are now is, like you talked about, going back, ripping the roster, the studs, building it the right way, fixing the cap, adding in pieces and going from there. And you're seeing how when you do it in that way, it is sustained success that you can get after. But I like that quote a lot.
I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
Shortcuts shorten long-term success.
Nice.
I nailed it.
I was gonna say.
I think.
Well, it sounds good anyhow.
Yeah, either way.
I also want to add something in here. I want to give credit, and it'll come up, I think, in a little bit too, is for all of the criticism of Terry Pagula and ownership when we talk about the Buffalo Sabres. If fans who watch this know, they own the Sabres too, and that franchise hasn't worked. Terry Pagula has been willing to spend money.
Yep.
Spend cash over and above, which not everybody does. One team that doesn't do that is the Kansas City Chiefs. That is not a big thing with the Chiefs. They are not as aggressive with the void year contracts and spending money. Now, look, they've still had incredible success and it's worked for them, but that is not what they are known for. And it's worked, so it's fine. But the Bills do that.
Mm-hmm.
The Bills will spend the money, even at contracts may be smaller, but like the Bosa deal is you are spending money and pushing the hit down the line. So that is money. Not every team is willing to do that. And I think it helps.
As we've said, not all NFL owners are created equal. They're not, they don't have the same liquidity. They don't have the same willingness to spend the money and cut the checks like they do. And that's also credit to Bean as a GM to understand the loopholes in the fake salary cap so they can use it to their success.
Yes. Until the league finally says, we're going to make it real.
Yeah.
Let's see what they do.
All right. We have to mention your Eagles.
Yeah. Look, the owner of the Eagles is Jeffrey Lurie. I think right now he's the best owner in pro sports. I think he just is. He has done an incredible job with that team. as an owner. I'm just talking about the ownership. He's the best owner.
This Philly is showing.
He spends the money. The team itself is it's funny. When he came in after a short period of time, he made this phrase, and they always brought it up. He'd say, "We want to be the gold standard of the NFL." And he got ridiculed because they never could get past the NFC
Bronze.
Championship. Yeah, right. And then they eventually made a Super Bowl and they lost and whatever. And then he figured it out. And he finally did figure it out. So they have that. They have the GM. They spend the money. They draft well.
Mhm.
They have done it with different iterations of the teams. As
Mhm.
great as the Bills and the Ravens recently and the Chiefs have been, I mean, the Eagles did it with different quarterbacks and have done it that way to
Different
get there.
quarterbacks, different coaches. They've been able to.
And that's why I brought up the spending of the money. They are the gold standard of spending the most money out front. And
Salary cap isn't real to Philly.
Yeah, definitely the case there.
Yeah,
Every position, they have a guy that's in the top 5.
Right, because they're willing to put the cash out. And then, wait a minute, we should mention this if you haven't watched others. Dan, when do you think the cap will go up again?
Next year, and then the year after, and then the year after that, and the year after that too.
Yeah, at least at that point. So if you don't get our very weak attempt at sarcasm, it goes up all the time.
Weak, it's pretty strong. It's a pretty strong. I lay it on pretty thick.
Okay. And
the
that's
salary
what
cap isn't real.
And that's what they have done. And they have drafted very well. And, but not always. Like, they had their rough stretches, and then they did. So they've made it to 3 Super Bowls. They've won 2 of them. They have a very young team, especially on defense. They're all
helps
in their
when you
first
draft
year.
well.
Well, that's the biggest thing. And so
the draft
just
is
take guys
really,
from Georgia.
Yeah. And
it's worked out.
And sometimes trade with the dumb teams. And we'll get to the dumb teams.
And when I also think credit to Philly is when they have made dumb decisions, they then correct them. They don't sit there with pride and ego to let them get in their way. Jalen Reagor was a really bad pick.
Yep.
And they got rid of that very quickly.
Like, all-time bad pick. You passed on Justin Jefferson. Maybe it will end up as the greatest receiver of all time. And you took a guy who couldn't play. But they did. And then Carson Wentz, when it went south, it's like, oh, the cap hit. And Howie's like, not only did he get rid of the cap hit, he got a number 1 pick for him. So this is what they've done. And they have made mistakes.
Yes.
And you're right. And they just go out and go, no, we screwed up. It was bad. We're going to fix it. And then they end up going out and making other moves. So it is like with the Bills. I think people are confident in the management. The difference is they've won the Super Bowl. So they get that more, even from their own fan base. They get more of a benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott have not won a Super Bowl, which I think is the only big part, but it's the only part that holds it back.
All right. So in the mix, we have Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Ravens. Who would be your 5th team, Dan?
Those were my unanimous 4.
Yeah.
Like and then I had 5 or a couple other teams that were on the cusp of who I could make an argument for who I would have as the 5th.
So throw one out there.
I had Green Bay.
I like the Green Bay pick. I think they've been
very stable, no ownership. They're all owners.
Yes. Which is a unique thing. And can be positives and negatives. And it's probably a little bit, when I talk about that cash thing, it's probably more of a negative for them.
Absolutely.
Because they don't have the owner cutting the big check.
Right.
It's operated differently. They've done it with different quarterbacks. They've drafted those guys. It's kind of strange.
The
but
fan base is incredible.
Yeah.
You think of, like, the Steelers would have been a top 5. And I know they haven't had the playoff wins. That's like the big knock against them. But as I've said before, I think on the previous episode of the league, like, they're just turning into a joke. Like, they have this legacy, this aura. You know what you're going to get when you go to Green Bay. They're going to put out a respectable team every single year. They have direction, all of those things. But the Steelers don't have that anymore. And I still believe that Green Bay is going to be a team that will compete.
Jenna, don't you think the difference between the two with Pittsburgh and them is, once they didn't have the quarterback, Pittsburgh, they didn't have the quarterback. I mean, Green Bay,
they didn't address it either.
Yeah. Well, they keep trying with different guys, but they haven't. And whereas in Green Bay, they have gone from Hall of Famer to a very good player,
Yep.
whether he eventually gets to that. Whereas in Pittsburgh, it really dropped off, obviously, when Roethlisberger was done.
Yeah.
So they haven't been able to do it. Still a great organization. And I used to say on our podcast before, or even on the air before we even did this podcast, that the Steelers are what the Bills want to grow up to be. A smaller market team, Northeast, and try to be that. And I think they've not only done that, they certainly don't have the Steelers' history with all the Lombardis, but they're a better franchise than the Steelers now because the Steelers haven't been able to get past that point.
Undoubtedly.
Who else you have in there?
I had the Lions.
I did too. I had those in Mike's.
I'm surprised that you didn't say the Lions, honestly, when I said top 5.
Because it is a smaller sample size.
That's fair. I just think from what they've pulled themselves out of and the caliber of play that I now expect.
Yep.
The coach, quarterback seems stable, seems like there's culture, all that stuff. I just feel like, while you're right, their body of work is not as much as some of the other franchises we picked. You're like scoffing.
It's too small of it. I love the Lions. I love their fan base. They put up with a lot of shit through the years.
And Mike's seen a lot of it.
And I have. But it's only been really the last 3 years. They were terrible before that.
But I would be stunned next year if the Lions win 6 games.
So I'm going to give you...
Like, you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree.
I think they're a very, very good team. And right now, I just don't think the body of work is long enough. That's the only thing holding me back from saying is, in this short window, I would give them that. You could say, okay, they're one of those teams.
But we're also forecasting what I think the next 5 to 10 would be.
You could almost... Would you put the Houston Texans in there?
I thought they were like, to me, that was a team that's out of the top 5, but ascending.
So I have two teams that I think.
Here's the bracket in my head. Top 5, falling from grace, ascending. And like the top 5 are here. I would have the Texans being ascending, and I would have the Steelers falling from grace.
She wants to include everybody. That's it.
No, I'm just in my head. I'm like, okay, here we like this.
Jerry Hughes.
I love Jerry Hughes. Bring him back to Buffalo.
Okay. Because I thought about Houston, but they get I can't get over the Deshaun thing, like how things went there. And then they had to have that embarrassing year of, I also think of like the image of a franchise. And while they seem to have got it right, that was Houston could literally be a flash in the pan, where I think the Lions have built something.
Well, we'll see.
It is interesting because I do agree with you that I think the Texans, to me, don't have a long enough body of work for me to be like, they are where the Lions should be. But I have more faith in Detroit.
Yes.
And the moments that they've played in so far, and the record that they've had, all that stuff.
It's a better story.
Yes, but you're looking at it.
So who do you have?
I think the Rams are in there.
I could see the Rams, but I just feel like right now, I just don't know.
So the Rams are a better team than the Lions right now. I think the Rams.
No.
Yeah, no question. In fact, I think, the Rams are a better team than the Lions right now.
I don't agree with that.
The Rams, the Lions, let's see how the Lions look without their OC and their DC with a head coach, because I saw it happen in Philly when they got the wrong guys in there. I'm not saying they're not going to get the wrong guys, but it's different people. And I think the Rams, very solid head coach, GM with Snead, and they have done a heck of a job. And they were good last year, and they have been good for a good stretch. They did it before by screw those first round picks, and then they made their draft picks and made excellent draft picks, especially on defense. I don't think you can shortchange the Rams at all.
I think Stafford, and I love Matt Stafford.
You do.
I have questions. I still think arm talent, making the throws, he is top tier, right underneath the Allen, Burrow, Mahomes. Like, really, that's how much. But I don't think they have a plan after that.
Well, you're right.
And they've got offensive line concerns. Like, they're still trying to figure out. And for all you say, Love, like the culture, I don't know what the Rams culture is.
It's been winning.
And I think the Lions literally have a tough nose. When after a game where you play the Lions, you lose the next game because they physically beat you up. And they didn't have Aiden Hutchinson this year.
In very recent time, the Rams have gone to the Super Bowl with 2 different quarterbacks, including the Lions quarterback, and then they went back again and they won it.
It's a plus for the Lions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying is I think if you look at it at least the way I was looking at this, it would extend beyond the Lions and the Lions type of winning just recently. I really wish that year they would have made the Super Bowl. That was brutal the way they lost.
Yep.
That's not about organization. They came back. They were still great again this year, and they failed in the playoffs, and that's tough.
The reason I don't have them in my top 5 is just because forecasting the future of quarterback for them, I just feel more secure. I think Matthew Stafford is a better quarterback than Jared Goff, but I just think Goff has more tread on the tires. And what do you like? Finding the franchise quarterback is a huge piece of being a top 5 team.
I don't disagree. They do have Sean McVay, and that helps.
I'm not. Yeah.
But if you had to say which team is more likely to have 5 wins next year, if Stafford gets injured in week 2, I think they're in trouble. I think the Lions have a defense enough that can defense a run game, and
I think there's a lot of teams that you take. I mean,
well, yeah, but Stafford's been injured a lot.
Yeah. Okay. I just think
I feel like his elbow's a ticking time bomb, and I love the guy.
Listen, you guys that's your opinion on that. I think I took it as a bigger picture thing with the entire organization.
So did we.
So I think again, I'm projecting like where they've been at the last probably 4 or 5 seasons, and then what do I expect from them in the future.
Yeah.
Is yours more based in the past?
It's past, and I think honestly, I have more faith in Sean McVay going forward.
I like your other answer more than your Niners answer. Or your Rams answer.
Well, I was going to say the Niners, to me, the Niners is their past success more than the future. I think theirs is strange, but they had been a really good franchise.
Absolutely.
They also have an incredible history, but that's back. But they have been really good. They were so close. I mean, they should have beaten the Chiefs twice in the Super Bowl and lost both those games. Kyle Shanahan's a great coach, man, but when it falls for him, it happens in the big moments. But I think theirs is a little more in the past. I would say that, I guess maybe I'm just a little bigger on the Rams than you guys in terms of that defense is going to be really good.
I like your Niners call,
on the line. Yeah.
But there is always seemingly somebody holding out. Like there always seems to be a little bit of a they can't figure out how to pay all of their guys correctly or efficiently, in the sense of you're going to pay the saga with Ayuk went on too long. The saga
for the Niners.
Niners.
Yeah,
with
Trent
Trent Williams, like there always seems to be a little bit of like, oh, it'll get worked out, and then it doesn't get worked out, and then you're like, oh, this may be something.
I would have rather for the Niners seen them clean house a little bit and then come back
and they drafted Trey Lance. The Brock Purdy thing, it doesn't erase that you also drafted Trey Lance.
Yeah.
Traded up all of those picks. It doesn't mean like great move there by Lynch, really, really good move. He also had a boneheaded first round pick.
Yeah. And it cost you. It definitely cost them. But to their credit, like we said, good organizations say this didn't work.
Yep.
And they were fortunate in that way. So
those are my
okay. So do we want to order them? I don't think we're going to be able to have a unanimous order.
No, I guess if I was looking at my order, you go ahead first, Jenna.
Go ahead.
I would do Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Ravens, Lions.
I have Eagles, Chiefs, Bills, Baltimore, Green Bay.
It's weird that you did some cities, some.
I know.
Just kind of threw me off a bit.
Officiating your wedding. I'm just trying to navigate everything.
I would have had 5 would have been the Rams. 4 would have been.
Mike goes the opposite way.
5 would have been the Rams.
We all went 1 to 5. You're going 5 to 1.
5 would have been the Rams. 4 would have been the Ravens. 3 would have been the Bills. 2 would have been the Chiefs. Organizationally, I have to say, I think the Eagles are number 1.
I think the Chiefs.
And that's fine. I mean, my God, they have the great history.
Yeah, let us know.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah. Also, a reminder, you can find our podcast available, the audio version, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Now let's have a little fun with the bad ones.
Okay. I want to start. I feel like I should start with you, Mike, because
there's so many of them. There are so many dumb teams.
There are a
I
few
feel
though
like-
that are cut above the rest.
This is in no particular order. The New Orleans Saints.
That's fair.
When they had Drew Brees and they were winning and that place was awesome and the fan base is engaged.
Yep.
And they do have a good, loyal fan base
No
down
question.
there. It was great. Since that time, they have been a mess. Terrible with the cap, terrible decisions in the draft, doubling down on things and not getting the results, trading away first-round draft picks, and never finding the next person for that franchise. I think it's been poorly run. I feel for the people down there. Also, adding into another element, I know there's been issues, obviously, with the dome down there. That's not the greatest facility in the world. I think it's a tough sell to players sometimes for New Orleans. So I think there's a lot of things that have gone against them.
Yeah.
They need a bit of a reboot. That has
Yeah.
not been a good team or a good franchise.
They need to be the
Sorry.
2018 Bills.
I'm just laughing at you talk about the stadium when you guys were there when the Bills played on Thanksgiving, the Saints, and Dan had like a moldy sandwich that they gave everyone.
It wasn't moldy, but that was Thanksgiving. Trey White tore his ACL.
Yeah.
And
Sad.
it was the saddest box lunch you've ever seen.
We will put the picture. We have the photo of Dan
I
with
definitely
the
have
box
that.
lunch.
I definitely have that. Photo.
But
That's a big part of the ranking.
yes,
It's a big part of
that
the
was
ranking.
lunch.
When you talk about worst franchises, what are they feeding the media?
The
That's true.
Superdome was a great building. And then certainly Katrina had a big impact, and it ended up being just a place of horrors for real people in that. And I just think that's only part of it. I mean, I feel for when you're in that place, that can't help but come to your mind. I just don't think they've been a very well-run organization. And we talk about spending money and kicking the can down the road. They did it with bad players and no quarterback. That's why they never did a reset.
Yeah. And that's where everybody always says, like, oh, you got to pay the salary cap. You're going to have to pay the bill. Yeah. If you're the Saints, like that's part of it, because you never hit the reset button. You never did the 2018 Bills of, all right, we got to get things under control for the future, because they were fine with kicking the salary cap down the road when they were winning and going to the playoffs and had Drew Brees. So don't say that it doesn't work. When you win, it's fine. But since then, Mickey Loomis, their GM, does not want to take his medicine, and that has hurt the team every step of the way. You have drafted poorly. You have signed aging quarterbacks to massive contracts because you're overpaying, because you can't figure out the draft. All of that has been a disaster. So like when people say the salary cap is real, Dan, look at the Saints. They are the most catastrophic team that does not know how to manage it. Whether or not you want to take the jokes, and I'm not going to go into the whole big thing about it, but like, you can manipulate it, and they don't know how to, and they're not willing to take their medicine and start over.
Even the Bills, because they have the quarterback and they've been able to build around him in 24, they took medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
You cut big name players from this franchise and tried to rebuild and got again within a play of the Super Bowl. So
football decisions that come with salary cap benefits. The players, as we've mentioned, the players the Bills cut and moved on from weren't good football players.
Okay, but they also made a deal and got rid of Stephon Diggs, who was a good player.
Agreed.
They did it for team culture and made it work.
Yep.
Because they have the other elements to them. So I feel for the fans in New Orleans, but right now that is a bad franchise, and I don't know what the future holds from them. They should be in the quarterback sweepstakes to see what they have at the end of the year.
I mean, I'm going to go Browns.
Yeah.
It's so easy in there. I mean,
that's a layup.
It literally is a layup. And then the atrociousness of Deshaun Watson, his play on the field, the off-field stuff, like all of it coming together. Obviously, the history that they had more recently too, with the struggles that they had been going through. Just, I think to me, it's like absolutely the Browns.
And they made him the first player with a fully guaranteed contract.
Yeah,
it was a disastrous decision. It made them the enemy of the state with all the other NFL owners. It was obviously a horrible decision. And it's funny because they had Baker Mayfield before that and
was turning it around.
Yeah. and he ends up playing hurt and didn't play as well. And then they boot him out. And now he is a no question top 10 quarterback in the
Absolutely.
league and a gamer and tough and the kind of guy they would
And they love him.
And a
love
guy
in
that would
Cleveland.
fit in Cleveland.
So
that
much
did.
so. Yeah. So they've made so many mistakes. It's bad ownership, bad management of the cap, bad
Yeah.
management of the draft.
And Stefanski's a good coach.
Yeah, but he may get, I mean,
He might
He's
be
going to be
a
a casualty
victim.
of it, of the situation.
Yeah, but it's so.
Browns fans don't need to hear anymore because you could go on for a long time about that. But the one I think that is not a team that initially comes to mind, but when you think about the grand scheme of underachieving and all of the expectations, the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
It's comical for a team that has other teams don't have the resources or the knowledge, or they're trying to figure things out. The Cowboys should not be one of those teams that consistently finds ways to get in their own way, like an owner that just bought a team and is like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take charge of this. I ran my technology company this way. I'm gonna run an NFL team. And then they're like, hey, by the way, that's not how like professional sports works. Jerry Jones knows how to run a team, and continually, whether it's the coaching, whether it's the contracts, whether it's literally just the play on the field or bad luck or whatever, they are, with all of their aura, with the star, America's team, they are one of the bottom 5 teams, in my opinion, franchises in the NFL. No?
I would say they've been given a lot. That star is big. They are one of those franchises. There are players around the league who would love to play in Dallas. They have drafted well. They have brought in some very good players there. Because it's Jerry, and I think he likes the attention, they drag all of those contract situations out. Look, they're doing it with Micah Parsons. They did it with CeeDee Lamb. I never understood why you want to almost make your players feel unwelcome and then eventually some that you pay.
Yeah.
And the whole Dak Prescott thing, the way it worked out, and it's kind of funny the way it worked out. Like they could have signed him. They tagged him. Then he got hurt. And then they come back and they give him this big contract. And now it looks like a really bad contract. Not that Dak's not a good player, but it hasn't worked out. And I think the Cowboys, the team I was going to add to this is the Cincinnati Bengals, because they do a lot of the same thing, but I don't look at the Bengals having the same advantages in the total world like they do in Dallas.
We're sitting there saying like some owners are cheap and all these things. It's Jerry.
Yes.
And it's the press conferences in the tunnel after the game. It's all of these things that turns it. Even you draft a great player like Micah Parsons, or you draft a great wide receiver like CeeDee Lamb, but then you play around with it and make it a sideshow and make it not good PR. It's negative PR.
Yeah.
It makes it unlikable. The Dak, all of those things of like, well, I don't know. We'll see. He's got to do it. Like, that's not, in my opinion, what a well-run franchise does.
And Jenna, if you wait to sign a guy,
they get more expensive.
And they've done that with almost every one of those
Did you not
players.
have Dallas?
No, I don't. I get what you're saying, like the expectations that are on them. I just feel like, to me, I would say more like the Giants. I don't know who else you guys had, but I think like they've had success, like within the last, probably
Well,
it's been
15
like,
years.
Yeah, about that. But like just Tommy Cutlets under center, like what it has looked like, how poorly it has gone. I get what you're saying completely. To me, the Giants just, and we love Brian Dable on this podcast, but it has been and then you have Joe Shane with the Hard Knocks, the look about Saquon and everything that came from that. I just think, to me, like the Giants, if we're going to look at that division, I would say the Giants to me are a team that stands out more so than the Cowboys. You're right. The Cowboys have everything that it takes to be successful and cannot get out of their own way. Whereas to me, the Giants are just dysfunctional and have not figured out a way to just get through it and figure things out on the field.
It is wild that the Cowboys have the longest streak with not making the championship game in the whole NFC. What is it? 29 straight years, something like that. And and just poorly run. You're right about the Giants.
Yep.
And they had those 2 Super Bowls when they beat Brady and they did all that. And since that time, I think they have 1 playoff win.
Yeah.
During that time. So it has been bad. And look, you can look at, there's other franchises like the Jacksonville Jaguars have been poorly run. They ended up playing in London because they weren't selling out games. The Bills did the same thing in Toronto. Now that London thing has become a bigger thing when it's happened for the league, but it wasn't a great thing. And it wasn't a great thing with that franchise. Poorly run, no stability, Urban Meyer, drafting a quarterback and it never working out.
That was the one reason I almost had them in the bottom 5, because I do think that the Khan family like does want to put a good team on the field. Like, it's not like they're cheap. Like, they will go out and spend. It's
poor
not
general managers. And they've been
the Urban Meyer thing was like so bad.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah.
But then like the Giants had Ben McAdoo. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
they've had,
like there's just some, you're
that
like,
guy,
right?
Just the image of him.
And the New York Jets.
Who did you
there's
have?
no
Longest
question.
playoff drought.
Yeah, longest playoff drought, dysfunctional, poor ownership.
But you can't say they don't have talent. Like, that's always what's crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, they have some good players on defense. They have a nice wide receiver. They've struggled with the
You
offensive
don't think
line.
they have talent? We always like.
That's why I pushed back on Mike, where I was like, they've actually fielded a roster of
I know,
talent.
but
some teams can't even do that.
Yeah.
They have about 5 or 6 very good players on that roster. Right? Most of them on defense.
I'd say more.
I would say more.
If we were to go guy off and go dude for dude, like, I think that at times that's the expression.
Okay, go.
There are, I think in years past, you can make a couple of arguments that they were more talented at times than the Bills.
I agree. I think last year you could say that.
Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner. They have some talented defensive linemen.
Had like Aaron Rodgers last year.
CJ Mosley was a dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's retired now. And I'm saying
it's not next season.
No, I'm saying is, and they didn't do it, and he didn't do anything. And the defense was bad last year, and they're so dysfunctional. You're looking at, yes, we just said Dallas has talent on the team, has no idea how to manage it and work it. And they have more talent probably. Well, they've had more talent probably than the Jets. No, the Jets are no question in my bottom 5.
Okay.
And it's 14 years and counting.
Do you have anyone else?
Arizona and Chicago. Chicago, they are the epitome of bad teams make bad decisions and make bad moves. They are the epitome of that. Cannot get out of their own way. Coaching dysfunction. I guess they're getting a stadium together, but they can't figure that out. And Arizona is just so unforgettable as an organization for me that never really seems serious.
Forgettable.
What about forgettable?
What did I say?
Unforgettable.
What about the Panthers, though? No?
Oh, yes. The Panthers
like,
definitely are. Now, they had the new owner come in with a lot of money. To Dan's point, this is the way I did it, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Throwing drinks on fans is never
And
great.
the one other team I wanted to throw in there is the Tennessee Titans.
They're floundering.
They are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Callahan's the right guy coach.
Yeah.
Now they've drafted again with the number 1 pick. Like, they've made a lot of mistakes, trading AJ Brown, all those things that they've done. And yes, that was a very good franchise. They had Mike Vrabel. Now he's in New England. So they've made a lot of mistakes.
Okay. All right. We got our list.
Yeah.
We want to hear from you what you think the top 5 best franchises in the league are and the top 5 worst. I'm curious to see what people will write in.
I could put any of them worst, but I have to say, I think the Browns would make my number 1.
Yes. Agreed. 1,000%.
Browns and Saints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neck and neck. No, honestly, I think the Browns are worse, but.
And the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, okay. All right, for Mike Catalana and Dan Fetes, I am Jenna Cottrell. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you again for watching The League, presented by Stellar Roofing, Windows, and Siding. We'll catch you next time here on the Buffalo Plus channel, presented by Connors and Ferris. Thanks for watching.